I now give the call to the Honourable, the Second Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Member for Maranoa.
Yes, and thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Member for Forrest and the government benches for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight in this grievance debate. Deputy Speaker, I rise this evening to highlight the failure of the Labor government to deliver for the people of the Maranoa electorate and also the people of regional, rural and remote Queensland and across, as we've just heard from the Member for Forrest, across Australia in regional and rural parts of Australia. Deputy Speaker, Queensland, as you'll be well aware, is home to 1/3 of the country's regional population and is also the powerhouse of development for Australia's economy. I know I'll be challenged by the Member for Forrest, who would also, I should acknowledge, the great contribution regional Western Australia also makes to the national economy. Yet, both states, they are powerhouses, and yet this Labor government continues to neglect the communities who are absolutely the backbone of our country. And when I talk about the communities, I talk about the workers, the families, the businesses that live in those small, regional, rural and sometimes very remote communities, and particularly the workers who work out there. They contribute so much to our national economy, and of course they are these businesses and enterprises based out in regional and rural and very many parts of remote Australia. My electorate of Maranoa is particularly the home to the Surat Basin, a great energy resource. But what we are seeing is a classic two-speed economy. It's developing as the coal seam gas industry continues to grow. On one hand, we've got the traditional industries. I'm sure the Member for Forrest knows it well. We see our traditional industries, agriculture and the businesses that service that sector. And on the other hand, we've this coal seam methane gas industry that is moving ahead in leaps and bounds, but the growing pains are really being felt across our traditional industries and families who've been long-time and term residents in these communities. Deputy Speaker, their ability to offer higher salaries, that is the CSG companies, they're able to attract workers who would normally be employed in the region's traditional industries. And as a consequence, soaring rent and property prices are pushing locals just out of the market. Road infrastructure is crumbling under the pressure, and local schools and even healthcare providers have reached maximum capacity. I was only called by the local healthcare provider in the aged care facility, a residential home, recently in my own town of Rama. They said, we can't afford $120,000 for someone to care for our older citizens in the community. We can't afford even $70,000 that they are paying to apprentices, and yet the resource sector can do that. They said, and the people who come to town, like teachers and part-time workers and people who've never owned their own home, might have been renting a home for $250 a week. They get a call from the local real estate agent the other day, and they said, we want to negotiate a new rent for your property, your rental property, which you are now. Your rental term has expired, and they say, we'd love to re-rent it. Been paying $250 a week. They said it's going to $600 a week. In fact, a 4-bedroom home in my hometown of Rome the other day rented for $1,000 a week with quarterly reviews. One in Dalby the other day for $2,200 a week for a 5-bedroom home. Admittedly, it's serviced and they get cleaners in, but $2,200 a week. Our traditional industries and traditional economy and the traditional people, I don't call them traditional, but they have been associated with those traditional industries and communities for decades and decades. Just cannot meet those sorts of costs. And yet we're still only in the early stages of this industry. But the pressure on Maranoa's communities will continue to grow. And yet the state and federal Labor governments have failed to undertake the planning that has been required to ensure that these growing pains are not felt across the community, whether it's in housing, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in roads. They have just been prepared to sit back, take the mining royalty, shift it into the capital cities and larger outer metropolitan areas in some cases, but they are ignoring rural and regional areas of my electorate and I know in many other parts of these resource states across Australia. Deputy Speaker, that was never more evident than when the Regional Development Australia Fund was announced last week. Yeah. In Queensland, there wasn't not one grant west of the Great Dividing Range. They had grants for the Gold Coast, for heaven's sake. The Gold Coast, the 6th largest city in Australia. They had ones all along the coast. And if you look in New South Wales, the Northern Rivers area, and you look in the Wollongong area, look around the Newcastle area, but there's one thing in common in New South Wales, bar one grant, they're going to Labor electorates. No. Oh yes, they are. And you go to Victoria, Geelong for instance, can you imagine? Geelong, regional or rural Victoria? Hardly. And yet some of that money would have been so welcome in a town of my electorate of Barcaldine. Yeah. They are needing a daycare centre. Yeah. And if we are to attract young families into some of these towns out in rural and remote parts of my electorate, surely a prerequisite is a daycare centre. They need something like $2 million for a daycare centre. And as the local pharmacist who's recently gone to Barcaldine and bought the business said, my husband worked and she's taken over the business of the pharmacy, and she said, but we'd love to have a family. But we really can't afford to stay here now, so what do we lose? A young couple, potentially a young family that would provide, obviously, a great service through the pharmacy and children in time to the schools. But without a daycare centre, that couple will more than likely leave Barcaldine. And so, once again, it's about how these families look at their prospects for the sort of livability of these communities, and yet $2 million out of this fund would have made a lot of difference to that community. Deputy Speaker, also there's $2 million, as I said, given to the Gold Coast, 6th largest city in Australia. But what would it have done for the Stanthorpe support services in west of the Great Dividing Range? It would have done a great deal to support that community and the work that they do, supporting families. But no, there was no money made available west of the Great Dividing Range. In the Merway Shire Council of Western Queensland, they wanted money for flood mitigation. And yet the Labor government invested $4.79 million in Townsville on the coast. But what did they do? What did they do for the people of Charleville and the Merway Shire Council, which have been flooded every other year for a number of years now, and they need to do more flood mitigation work? They applied for money, a very professional application, as was their one from Barcaldine, but no money west of the Great Dividing Range. Rural remote Queensland missed out, ignored, absolutely. And what about the Mitchell Retirement Village in the Marinara Regional Council area? They need about $1.5 million. They could have easily found that surely in a grant program of $150-odd million. A very professional application, a very worthwhile project. But what did they do? The Labor Party, they put $2 million in near Ipswich. That has gone to a facility in a Labor electorate. No. Surprise, 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 in the growing region of the southeast corner of Queensland. Now, I don't deny that all those other communities are worthy communities. Yeah. But what about this Prime Minister? She said only 12 months, a little over 12 months ago, she is going to be a Prime Minister for rural and regional Australia. Well, the first opportunity we've seen them act with this grand program, we didn't see the money come out in Queensland, west of the Great Dividing Range. Deputy Speaker, the other one I want to touch on is this switch over to digital television in those communities of less than 500 people. I recently had the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Abbott, out in Birdsville, where he met with the communities out there. There's about 6,000 people in the town of Birdsville, a normal population of 150, but through the tourist season, many thousands of people flock to that part of my electorate in the outback of Australia. Now, this time next year, if this government do deny the Darwin Shire Council the opportunity to be given a licence for the digital spectrum to rebroadcast that facility, there will be no signal in the air. They will only have a satellite receiver only. Now, if you're coming from some parts of Australia, you end up in Birdsville for the races or just for the outback as part of a tourist. You don't think about, oh, we must take a satellite dish with us if we want to watch the State of Origin during the winter months. You don't think about that. A few years ago, we went out there and just put our little ears up because it's a signal rebroadcast into the community. Yes. That is going to be lost under this government's proposal for those communities of less than 500. I've got something like 34 of those communities in Queensland, and these are towns of less than 500. They deserve better from this government. They should not be treated as second-class citizens. They should not be left behind. They should at least have the opportunity for a rebroadcast signal that is digital, but a rebroadcast rather than a satellite-only solution.
Members' time has expired.